Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. John McMullen's here, everybody. We're going to talk a little Birds. They get ready for the Vikings this Saturday. You can listen to the game on 97.3 ESPN. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick have the call. It's the final tune-up before the regular season. What questions need to be answered there? A lot from Eagles practice, including Jalen Hurts threw an interception. Holy mackerel. We'll talk to John McMullen, Birds 365, weekday mornings at 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel, and he joins me now. The look at the Eagles and the Vikings as they get ready for the final tilt here. And, John, I know the last preseason game, there's a couple of battles that still need to be won. I don't know how many of those are going to play out on the field on Saturday. Is there anything Saturday that you think is definitely worth watching on the field in terms of these positions that are still up for grab, if there's any at all?
No, I don't think there's going to be any at all from the standpoint of the competitions amongst the starters or key players. For the back end of the roster, maybe Tristan McMullen at safety can make a late run. You think about last year and Eli Ricks and what he was able to do with that pick six in the preseason. So if you make a play, if you splash, I think it's important for Anaya Smith, who's been better over the past week. He's kind of finally settled into it. If he makes a play, returns a punt, a kickoff, long pass reception, maybe that puts him over the top. You're kind of looking at the back end of the roster more than guys who are going to be a part of the team. And, that was shown today, nearly a 2-hour practice where it was essentially a scrimmage, intra-squad scrimmage. So that's where all the key players were getting their work for this week. And preseason game will be for the back end of the roster for both teams. And Minnesota's going to play it that way as well, especially after losing J.J. McCarthy already. They're not even going to mess with putting, players like Sam Darnold out there, never mind Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and I know that you look at this offense, I guess today, Saquon Barkley, kind of a load management day there. That was one area we talked about him yesterday a little bit, but Barkley – what is behind Barkley? How's that whole materializing? What's that looking like? Because I'm wondering how much Barkley playing time is going to be. Is he going to get 75% of the snaps? What's behind him? What's that look like?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. I mean, we've seen it before, but as you mentioned, it was a load management day for Saquon, and Kenny Gainwell was pretty much the star of the practice. I mean, he took advantage of it. 2 touchdowns, making plays all over, especially in the passing game. Really took advantage of Devin White with a similar juke move. If people were at the Lincoln Financial field practice, he did it against Nakobe Dean. He was a star player. You start to say, "Oh, this guy." I mean, you got to get him some touches, especially in the passing game. And then you do have the history of injury with Saquon Barkley dating back to New York. So, I think they'll be smart about it. And there's very few running back situations around the NFL any longer that isn't sort of a duo, tandem type thing. So I think they'll have a role for Kenny Gainwell. And but certainly, it's going to be Saquon Barkley, and the improvement, I think, comes probably in the 4-minute game. But you do have some, the ability to close games down the stretch when you have the lead in that 4-minute offense. But you do have to worry at least a little bit about his durability and try to manage his touches to get him, in theory, to the playoffs as healthy as possible.
I saw C.J. Uzomah was released today by the Eagles. He was a veteran tight end here. I guess that kind of solidifies what it will be like behind Dallas Goedert, or is there something that they're going to do, maybe continue to look on the streets for?
Yeah, I think that's a position I have to look at trying to upgrade. I mean, you see it, Dallas Goedert's out right now, a tweak to his oblique, and hopefully that's not serious. He was out watching practice, so I don't think it's terribly serious. Typically, if there's something that's going to keep somebody out for a while, they don't let them sit and watch practice. So that part was positive. But when he's not out there and you start looking at, Grant Calcaterra is your tight end 1, and E.J. Jenkins, who's banged up, is your tight end 2 because Albert Okwuegbunam is also hurt. And as you mentioned, they released C.J. Uzomah, who did not have a good summer. So they're trying to give him a little bit of a head start as a veteran player to maybe find another situation. It's not a great depth situation at tight end for the Eagles right now.
All right, John McMullen, Birds 365 on the Jacob Media YouTube channel, weekday mornings at 8 a.m. Looking at all Eagles, they get ready here. There's a couple things, as you take a look at this 53, we're trying to kind of put that together. Is there offensive line situations here that you're still keeping a look at based on some injury stuff, or all those guys kind of here?
No, I mean, certainly the depth is very malleable and depends. Trevor Keegan's injured now. He hurt his hip at practice on Tuesday. Didn't practice today. Similar to Dallas, though, he was watching, so hopefully it's not too serious. But he's a guy that's locked in, but the injury might change things from that standpoint. And then you start to think, all right, how many can you keep? Can you keep 10? Do you have to keep 9 because you want to keep an extra edge rusher like Patrick Johnson? Do you want to keep an extra corner because you're so deep at corner? So those are the difficult decisions that Howie Roseman has to make. But one thing, and Howie's a very good GM, and I always say it, and you're in that camp. A lot of people aren't in that camp. Well, they are now, but they weren't when we were, Mike. But that doesn't mean he's perfect, and I do think he kind of pigeonholed himself from a depth standpoint at both wide receiver and offensive line by taking 2 picks apiece on day 3. He doesn't want to cut his draft picks, right? So that means Keegan's got to make it. Now, he deserves to make it. He's played well enough to make it. Dylan McMahon would have to make it, and that's more questionable. You could probably get him through waivers and get him on the practice squad, but I don't know if the Eagles will be comfortable with that. And then at wide receiver, obviously, you have Anaya Smith and Johnny Wilson, who you want to keep on your roster because they're draft picks, but they're really not going to be able to help you all that much this year. So a little bit of an issue from a depth standpoint when you talk about the draft strategy. Unless Howie's willing to say, you know what, I'll put him on the practice squad. I'll get him through waivers. So that's going to be one of the more interesting things.
What do you go with, 5 wideouts, you think, with this group here?
Well, for keeping Smith and Wilson, you got to keep 6. And that's arguably, now tight end would be in the conversation. I think we all thought that, all right, C.J. Uzomah is at least a veteran guy. He's played at a high level. At least he's going to be a good backup blocking tight end, and it's just never materialized.
Well, you would think that maybe – who has a better shot at getting through the practice squad? Can you put John Ross on the practice squad?
Yeah, you can put veterans on the practice squad. And if they're vested, they don't have to go through waivers. So that's the positive of it. You can sort of do the wink-wink deal and say, look, we need the roster spot because we can't put Dylan McMahon and put him on waivers, and that means everybody's got a shot at it. So you try to have those conversations with veteran players, and you can go about it that way. So it's certainly when you do have vested veteran guys that you can essentially negotiate with and say, look, you're our guy, but we just need the roster spot, and we'll elevate you each week, and then when the time comes, you only have 3 elevations. When the time comes, you put them on the 53. Usually that takes care of itself because the war of attrition that is the NFL, guys get injured almost every week. So you can sort of kick the can down the road from that perspective.
Yeah, and quarterback, what do you keep? 2 and 1? How's that work? They changed that rule, didn't they?
No, they're keeping 3. You can keep 2. They did change the rule as far as dressing on game day, but that doesn't affect the 53.
Okay.
Some teams keep 2 and keep 1 on the practice squad, but the Eagles value the position too much. They're not going to mess around with that. And they like Tanner McKee too much. If you do get somebody on the practice squad and you do get them through waivers, you're still at the mercy of other teams who may want to sign them off your practice squad. And they don't have to negotiate with you at that point. If somebody else offers a 53-man roster spot, they can leave without your permission. So it's, all of that factors into it. But certainly a guy like Tanner McKee, I don't think the Eagles would feel comfortable that, A, they could get him through waivers, and B, that they would even consider it.
On the defensive side of the ball, when you're looking at the 53 battles, I mean, obviously, I think it's a little interesting because you got Huff, you got Sweat, you got Nolan Smith, and Brandon Graham. Those 4 kind of edge rushers, they're in the mix. Anybody behind them that are still battling it out?
Well, no battles. I mean, Jalix Hunt's got to be on the roster, so there's another example. Now, Patrick Johnson should make the football team, but can you keep 6 edge rushers? And that's kind of the conversations you're having. And if they were to need, this is the interesting thing about keeping developmental players or younger players. If the Eagles had the 90-man roster, right, and they needed somebody to sub in for that top 4, well, it would be Patrick Johnson. He would be the next guy. But you can't put Jalix Hunt on waivers. No chance. So you have to carry him on the roster, and you have to either put Patrick on the roster or, again, get him to the practice squad. So these are the strategy moves you have to decide on, you have to make. But if the Eagles don't keep 6, and that's a lot, the 5 are locked in. The 5 are locked in. It's Huff, it's Sweat, it's Brandon, it's Nolan Smith, and it's Jalix Hunt. And the better, when you talk about meritocracy, Patrick Johnson might be able to help you more than Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith at this point, to be honest.
Yeah. And then, you look at tackle, you got Carter and Davis and Milton Williams, and then there's a bunch of guys who are all worthy candidates. I mean, if you like Tui Pelotu, Ojomo, Booker's name comes up a lot. There's a couple guys there behind the 3 that are making it.
Yeah, and Vic said he wants 5 to 7 interior defensive line people. Now, there's no way he's getting 7. None. So, maybe he can debate with how he can get a 6. But, again, if you're keeping 6 edge rushers, you can't keep 6 interior guys. So, you mentioned the 3 that are sort of gimmies. I think Moro Ojomo's in that category. I wouldn't say 100%, but well over 90%. He's had a good summer as a whole. And then you start debating, would you rather have Marlon Tui Pelotu or would you rather have Thomas Booker, who's had a very good summer? And that might be what's your favorite player, what type of player you want. Vic always wants a backup nose tackle, so even throw P.J. Mustafer in the mix, the bigger body guys to – if Jordan Davis goes down, you at least want to be able to replicate his presence in some form so you can play those 5-man fronts, and there you would need the bigger body. But, Vic has said, hey, if you're a backup, you got to play multiple positions. So that means nose, that means shade technique, 3 technique, 4 technique, 5, on and on and on. So, it's going to be interesting. But I would kind of default to likely Moro Ojomo and Marlon Tui Pelotu being those next 2.
All right, that's a good one though. Fangio, he wants more. We'll see if he how much power he has. And then you got the off-ball linebacker. It was funny because Ross Tucker on the Ross Tucker Report today said he doesn't have any questions about linebacker anymore. He thinks they're pretty good at this spot. He mentioned Bond having a good game against the Patriots, Nakobe Dean, and Trotter as 2 guys that he thinks by the end of the year can get more playing time. Devin White, I don't know that you're as confident about these linebackers, but how many of those sticking around?
Yeah, well, I think they're going to keep 5, and The four are obvious, and that's White, Vaughn, Nakobe Dean, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Ben Van Sumeren, I think, has made the team as one of the core special team guys. Very, very good special teams player. So I think he's number 5. And yeah, I'm not as high as Ross. If you look around the league, I love Ross, but he's a homer at this point.
This was, by the way, this was on his podcast, not during the game.
I know I know, and I've talked to him. And look, if you ask people around the league, it is universal. I mean, universal. The Eagles have one of the worst linebacker rooms in the NFL. Look at any rating, ranking. Everybody's got the Eagles in bottom 5 in linebackers. Now, I have been over these 16 practices. I'm a little bit happier with them than when it started, mainly because of Nakobe Dean over the past 10 days to 2 weeks, and he was very good today. And you see the seed changing, so to speak, and yeah, he's going to be on the field. It's just a matter of who's next to him at this stage. I'm pretty confident in that. I think Vic is just waiting for the reporters to leave to make the change. And that's happened. Today was the last day we get to watch team drills in their full. So I think it's going to happen very quickly. And it already has happened from a rep standpoint. And this was the last practice because everybody's hyper-focused on who gets the first rep. And that's been consistent. It's been Devin White and Zach Bond. But I counted up the first-team reps as a whole today because they rotate those two guys plus Nakobe plus Trot. All 4 of them get first-team reps, and even Ben gets a few here and there. But Nakobe had the most first-team reps today. Mm-hmm. And that's a recent change.
All right, the secondary was maybe the spot that most people were kind of intrigued by at the beginning. You had a whole slew of names, and who has kind of stuck it out here. Who are the guys that are going to be hanging around? And there's going to be some names that I'm sure the Eagles are not going to want to part with, but they're going to have to.
Yeah, it's funny. Eli Ricks started making some plays. So Eli kind of shows up right before. I'm an old school boxing fan. I don't know if you are, Mike, but Sugar Ray Leonard was one of the greatest of all times. And Sugar Ray would admit, like, he would steal rounds at the end. He would make these big flurries at the end of rounds and steal a round. And everybody would think, oh, look at Ray in those last 30 seconds. And he might have been coasting for the first 2.5 minutes. I don't think Eli's doing that, but he kind of coasts, and he did the same thing as a rookie, and he's not that good, and he's not that good, and he's not that good. And then he makes these big impressions. Today he had an interception near the cut down to 53. They're so talented now at corner. I don't think it's going to save them this time. But yeah, they're gonna have to waive or release players that are NFL level corners. And yeah, there's not much you can do. You can't keep 8, 9. So the guys who are going to be here are Darius Slay, Quinyon Mitchell, Isaiah Rogers, Cooper DeJean, Kaylee Ringo. Those are the 100%ers. And then I've shifted Avonte Maddox to safety now, so I don't even count him in the corner discussion.
That's a good sign, though, right, John? If Maddox is out of the mix, he was a pretty good corner when healthy. His problem was he never healthy. But if you're ready to move on from him and say, we're confident enough that we don't need him to play that spot, that's a good sign, right?
Yeah, I mean, because they have, since Cooper has been back, they're playing him in the slot. Obviously, they're putting Quinyon Mitchell in the slot as well. So Avonte really isn't getting many slot reps at all, except in the dime defense when there's only one linebacker on the field. And that's more of a labeling type thing. He's still the extra safety, but he's down near the line of scrimmage, so you might label it as playing in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've kind of shifted to that. Now, if they need somebody, he'll go in and play slot. It's not, when you have 90 guys, you don't have to worry about the cross training.
And they never looked at Rodgers in the slot, though, right?
No, he's never gotten one rep in the slot. And, it was interesting because he's 180 pounds, as he admitted yesterday. So,
wish I was.
Theory, yeah, so do I. But in theory, it's not good for an outside corner in the NFL. So we'll see how that shakes out. He does sometimes have some trouble with A.J. Brown, but everybody has trouble with A.J. Brown.
It's Job versus Ricks, basically, right?
Yeah, and I would think Michael Clay is going to be pounding the table pretty significantly for Josh Jobe. Now, from the standpoint of they were able, to keep them both last year, and as well as Mario Goodrich, and they got Mekhi Gardner, who was in the mix through waivers anyway. So, the hope is you can get them through waivers and get them back on the practice squad and keep everybody. But to me, the odds of guys going down and, Quinyon Mitchell and Isaiah Rodgers and Kelly Ringo going down, and you're actually going to get to Eli Ricks at corner is pretty low. To say that a guy that's going to be your best special teams player and has been your best special teams player and is one of the best punt gunners in the NFL and one of a bunch of coverage players who plays a significant portion of those snaps. I mean, to me, that's just more valuable. But Howie loves guys with natural cover skills. So, and Eli has natural coverage skills.
John, the safety, you kind of gave us one, Maddox. I would imagine C.J. Garner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, I guess, is going to be a part of the mix at some point. And then there's James Bradbury. Is there 4 safeties? What's this position look like?
Yeah, I think there's going to be 4 safeties, and I think Sidney's going to start on the PUP list. And that means, he won't be a part of the 53, so you don't have to worry about that. And he's got to miss 4 games, and he should be back by week 5. I think that's how the Eagles are going to handle it, and then they'll make that decision on who to move on from at that point. And, again, you're probably going to have some other injuries. Maybe it becomes clear down the road. The interesting one to me is Caden Stearns because he's not healthy. And obviously Vic liked him from Denver. He drafted him there. He became an sort of up-and-coming player there. And then he had a pretty significant knee injury. He was waived and claimed by the Carolina Panthers, for those who don't know, who have the number 1 waiver wire priority. So he didn't last long. And they claimed him, and he failed his physical with Carolina. And he was back on the market, and the Eagles signed him. So he's not ready to play. He can't practice. He isn't practicing. He's still dealing with his knee. The Eagles could stash him on IR, but that means you're likely going to lose him for the season. So he's sort of the wild card. Like, how much does Vic like him? Do you want to wait until he's healthy? Or was it just a shot in the dark to see where he was and, cut him and bring him back to the practice squad if need be? That's what I think most likely is going to happen. With Bradbury, look, Howie has kicked the can down the road to this point. I find it very hard to believe he's going to wake up next Tuesday morning and say, all right, we're going to cut the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he took it this far. So if he doesn't move him, I think he's going to be on the roster. And that means Tristan McCullum's not going to be on the roster, and I think he's a guy similar to Patrick Johnson. I think he's made the football team with his play. But, despite what everyone says, the NFL is not always a meritocracy.
All right, John McMullen, Birds 365. Weekday mornings, 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. You can check him out. I think I'm on tomorrow, right? Tomorrow, Thursday? Yes. Tomorrow, 8:20.
Yeah, you're on tomorrow. A little shift, 8:20.
8:20.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I'm outside, so I apologize.
We couldn't tell.
Sure
I heard a little wind, but that's it. A little bit. It wasn't crazy. All right, well, McMullen's back. The Eagles are back this Saturday, 1 o'clock. They close out the preseason against the Minnesota Vikings, and you can hear it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. John McMullen, everybody. Thanks, bud.
All right, thanks, Mike.
There he is, Johnny Mac. And make sure you give him a follow at JF McMullen. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash, and he's brought to you by the Gallery Bar Book and Games. Go to the Gallery. Go to Ocean. Go for the win. For more info, visit oceanac.com. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Eagles this weekend. Sunday against the Vikings. Where do the Eagles rank in the most recent ESPN Power Rankings? We'll get that. Also, one ESPN writer has 5 teams that will decline in 2024. Are the Eagles one of them? And I'll play the bite from Ross Tucker on a position on the Eagles that you shouldn't worry about. That's all coming up on the Sports Bash, live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at Mike Gill Show. Use the hashtag SBLive.